This section is going to introduce fractal geometry, which was my favorite topics. Fractals are some crazy shapes that are so useful in life. Fractals are any sort of shape that we are going to repeat so that they have self-similarity. So the big picture looks like the tiny picture. We have fractals that show up in our world all the time, in our body, in our heartbeats, in our blood vessels, in the way our eyes move, in nature, leaves, snowflakes. In the Let It Go song from Frozen, she sings frozen fractals, referring to snowflakes, but they are so useful in life. We've known that there are these crazy patterns, but not until computers were invented did we have a way to mathematically talk about them. Once computers came about, we were able to assign equations to these patterns that we could not do by hand. So fractals are really modern math. There are some fractals that were drawn by hand throughout the probably 1800s and 1900s, and we'll see some of those in the next video. But we didn't call them fractals, and we didn't have a way to mathematically talk about them. So here's an example of what we mean by self-similarity. The big broccoli has the same properties as the small broccoli. So you wouldn't even know if you were looking, if the first picture, if this one was the whole huge bunch or a little bunch, unless we told you how we were zooming. So that's self-similarity. Ferns and a lot of plants also have self-similarity. Here's some artwork. These are computer generated, so we assign colors and places for things to graph according to equations. This was called kissing fish. You can see fish kissing, and if you were to zoom in right here, it would also look like fish kissing. A fern that was created using a computer. A lot of our CGIs, landscapes, are created using fractals. So they started with a triangle and then put it into the equation and had it repeat and repeat and repeat until they get a whole landscape. Here are fireworks. Benoit Mandelbrot is considered the father of fractals. He actually coined the term, and he was working with IBM on their first computer. And that's where he discovered that he could make a program that would assign mathematical equations to these crazy patterns that we had been looking at in nature for such a long time. I've linked a couple videos for you to look at that further explain fractals. Hunting the Hidden Dimension gives the kind of the history of fractals and easy uses, and you can also see how the computer works. There's an interview by Benoit Mandelbrot he did right before he passed away a few years ago. And then Ron English is a mathematics professor who went through and studied fractals that were used throughout history, and he gives a talk on going to Africa and seeing that as humans we were using fractals and knew about the self-similarity well hundreds of years before we had computers to assign them mathematical values. In the next video that I do, I will look at some of the mathematical properties behind the fractals.